West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire. This
was obviously an important day, and September 11th is an end date. The withdrawal could be accomplished before that time, but that's the end point for this.
Yeah, and I think that's intentional, Lawrence. I mean, first of all, to essentially make the point that having been there 20 years, we can hold our heads up high and say that militarily, we've done everything that we could. First in defeating al-Qaeda, taking out bin Laden, and then in trying to give the Afghan security forces and Afghan government a chance here, but that there's a diminishing return for what we can do militarily anymore. And the American people, I think, will see September 11th as a 20-year marker. And we're moving into a new period when we're no longer going to have troops convoy in Afghanistan. That's a big moment for the country. And I think that Joe Biden not only made the right decision, but he framed it as not just the end of our troop presence in Afghanistan, but the end of a particular kind of period that began on 9/11.
The president made it clear that we could see more military action there before September 11th. Let's listen to what he said about what happens if the Taliban attacks while the troops are being drawn down.
And the Taliban should know that if they attack us as we draw down, we will defend ourselves and our partners with all the tools at our disposal.
Ben, that sounds like something that could get us re-engaged militarily.
I don't think so, Lawrence. I mean, I think that Joe Biden essentially looked at the arguments from his team. I'm sure that the military was arguing to keep some force in Afghanistan. I'm sure that the intelligence community was warning that the Taliban could take over large parts of the country if we left. And evaluating those risks, I think he determined that this is still the right decision to make. Again, in part because our military having troops there is not solving the problems in Afghanistan. The only thing that can really solve those problems is some kind of diplomatic agreement in the country. I think he was saying very specifically that a withdrawal can be a very vulnerable time for our forces. They're moving out. There's less support for them in the country. They don't have the kind of large force that can come to the aid of a departing U.S. convoy. And he's sending a message to the Taliban that if you take action, you could face U.S. airstrikes, U.S. additional military force here. But I think the direction he set is pretty clear, and that's a direction of leaving Afghanistan.
And let's listen to what the president said about the terrorist threat that could remain in Afghanistan.
We'll not take our eye off the terrorist threat. We'll reorganize our counterterrorism capabilities and the substantial assets in the region to prevent reemergence of terrorists, the threat to our homeland from over the horizon. We'll hold the Taliban accountable for its commitment not to allow any terrorist to threaten the United States or its allies from Afghan soil.
Ben Rhodes, saying we'll hold the Taliban accountable could sound awfully strange.
Well, Lawrence, I think that's a message that he's sending that, look, Afghanistan, unfortunately, tragically for the people there who've suffered already so much, is going to be a difficult place here. It's going to be a grim and a conflict between the Afghan government and the Taliban that hopefully resolves itself in diplomacy. That message is about, within that context, the Taliban should not think that they should provide safe haven to a group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS that could threaten the United States. And what we're seeing here is a shift from the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, where we have large U.S. ground forces in these places, to a model like the model that was pursued against ISIS, where it's U.S. air power, often working with partners on the ground who share our objectives in terms of eliminating terrorist safe havens. It's one that doesn't require 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, or even in this case in Afghanistan, 2,500 troops to be in the country anymore. He's suggesting that we're going to use air power if we see a terrorist safe haven reemerge that threatens us in the United States.
What has changed in the withdrawal decision from the Obama White House to the Biden White House?
Well, part of it, Lawrence, is simply the passage of time. I mean, I was thinking today that not only is it 20 years since September 11th, this June will be a decade since we began our drawdown from Afghanistan. So this is not a precipitous withdrawal, as Republican opponents of this decision have been framing it. This has been a decade in which we've been handing things off to the Afghans. I frankly think we could have made this decision in 2015 and 2016. I think that part of what made that decision difficult at the time for President Obama is that you had the rise of ISIS and that there was some concern that there could be an ISIS safe haven in Afghanistan. But I think now part of what's happened, Lawrence, is that the American people, they want to move on. And, President Biden, he's talking about rebuilding this country, not the trillions of dollars we've spent in Afghanistan and Iraq, but rather the types of proposals he's putting forward to Congress right now to rebuild America. He's talking about China. He's talking about the challenges from pandemics and climate change. It's time clearly to turn the page here, even as we have to continue to support the Afghan people diplomatically and with our assistance.
It is Thursday, the 15th of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, looks like as we had there at the top with Ben Rhodes, we're after about 20 years now. It's about time to turn the page on Afghanistan. And by turning the page, you could have started off just by reading Moby Dick. Melville warned about Afghanistan in Moby Dick in the preamble. My God. If only people had paid attention to literature, they would know. But no, people don't listen to literature anymore. Listen. They're all on audiobooks. They don't listen and they don't read. Speaking of which, I'm quite peeved, as they say. My grandson's university has decided to drop his major along with his German program, and for just to round it all out, they're just going to get rid of all the humanities altogether. That's right. It's a teaching school. Western Oregon University, the oldest university, learning institution in Oregon. The oldest one. A teacher's college. A teacher's university. And they just decided to get rid of the humanities. Now, before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, my grandson was getting ready for his second term in Germany as part of this German program. He would go to Germany and go to the university there and take classes while they were all in German. Not English. They were in German. And he was doing quite well. And he's going to be a junior, and they've gotten rid of his major and his program. Yeah, let's just make all these stupid egghead universities into trade schools. That's what they're trying to do. So yeah, I'm a little bit peeved. What do? You're almost a junior, now you got to go find another university? God, that makes me mad. Just Just really makes me mad. And especially since it's supposed to be a liberal arts school putting out teachers. No, don't need the humanities to teach. Huh. Yeah, what kind of humanities ever built an engine? Well, I would say the Renaissance might have had something to do with it, and they were, Renaissance men. And women, by the way. They didn't just hold themselves to the sciences, because actually the sciences were part of the humanities at one point. Isn't that odd? So no time for self-reflection. No time to consider how it all began. And absolutely no time for what does it all mean. Don't have time for that. Now get to work, you cog. We're all cogs in the machine, and we are replaceable. Don't you ever forget it. Okay, well, the defense in the Chauvin case is pulling out all the stops. And when I mean pulling out all the stops, I mean they're trying to confuse the jury, who apparently don't know anything anyway. That's how you get on a jury in America. You can't know anything about anything. Otherwise, you would have a bias if you actually knew something in which how to achieve critical thinking. So you can't have critical thinking on a jury, apparently, in America anymore. Maybe I'm being too insulting to this particular jury, because they did say that they had heard some things, but they would be able to put aside their biases and judge this trial objectively. They all signed a pledge to do so. And I am of the mind to give them the benefit of the doubt. But the defense, I thought lying was perjury in a court, in a trial. I thought you couldn't lie. So why the hell are they putting up these experts that seem to me like they're lying? Carbon monoxide killed George Floyd? Not the almost 10 minutes of a knee on his throat, in which the last 3 he was already dead, but they had to be sure. Carbon monoxide poisoning caused his demise? Well, let's hope that this jury knows a little bit about that. Please. Or, no, it wasn't being choked off with a knee to the throat. He had a cardiac arrhythmia. Well, isn't that what everybody has right at the point that they die? Their heart stops. Jeez. Confuse the jury. All they have to do is confuse one. That's all they have to do. And that's what they're trying to do. But I thought lying about it was called perjury. I thought you couldn't lie in a court. Silly me. Silly me. Well, it looks like in Brooklyn Center, they have more military protection for that tiny little, 27-member police department? They brought in the military to protect that tiny little thing, and there's more military there than was ever on the Capitol grounds on January 6th. A white woman cop kills a black kid. I know he was 20, but still he was a kid. Anybody under 40 is a kid. Anybody 40 is a kid to me. 45 even now. 20-year-old kid. Shot dead. And I guess they're calling in the military because they think that this is the time that all the black people are going to kill all the white people in their sleep. They didn't have this kind of military might on the Capitol grounds during the insurrection on January 6th because those are white people. They don't kill you in your sleep. They kill you while you're trying to certify an election. Way different. So, speaking of which, way different, Josh Hawley has a picture of him standing with the Missouri National Guard, thanking them for protecting the United States on January 6th. This is the guy that was a member of the insurrection and still is. What's he trying to do? Make us forget? Yes, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They are attempting to squash the January 6th inquiry because they don't want America to know that they are Nazi insurgents. And 6 Nazis, speaking of which, 6 Nazis voted against the Asian American hate crime bill that we reported on yesterday. It was a test on the filibuster. Would they be able to break the filibuster and actually have a vote? 6 voted against it. Cruz, Hawley, Cotton, Tuberville. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but you get the idea. They voted against that because they are Nazis. They are the Nazi Republican Party. So I guess when you say good Germans, we're going to have to just say good Republicans because no good American would be a Nazi. Good Republicans would. And there's lots of those, about 71 mil. All right, we got our work cut out for us, as we always say. But I will say that at 59% approval, Joe Biden is well on his way to being able to alleviate these terrible concerns that we have about the direction of our country. No wonder Vlad didn't want Joe to be president. Because Joe doesn't suffer fools, especially Putin. And we'll talk about that in just a bit as we get past the sanctions. We'll talk about sanctions, but as we get past this involvement with Afghanistan. You know, actually, there's been some speculation that this will actually free Joe up to attend to the emerging threats around the world to the United States. You know, he says like Russia and China and, others, North Korea. I would say they're not so emerging. I think they have been emerged. But we're not going to shake hands with them and salute their generals. We're not going to do that. So we're getting out of Afghanistan. And we only have, 2,600 troops there anyway. Okay, well, bring them home, and we can maybe protect ourselves against the emerging threat of the Nazi states of America. And we know who they are. Yeah. One's making it illegal to give somebody a bottle of water and some French fries while they're waiting in line to vote. Trying to get rid of non-partisan electors. Illegal to have those deciding whether that ballot has been counted or not. We need partisan ones. And when we say partisan ones, we mean only one. The Nazi Republican Party. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say the Nazi Republican Party. Am I trying to say like I'm being an idiot because I'm calling them Nazis? No, they are Nazis. It's about time that we call them for what they are. They are totally against everything that America stands for. And America stands for the ability to change and become better. Yeah, we don't absolve ourselves of our past. We want to be better than that. In the Republican mind, no, they want the status quo. I mean, we want to go back to have the freedom to be able to enslave. The magic of the market, they say, until the market says, no, we don't want to enslave anymore. You know, not all of America was a slave state. The problem is appeasing these Nazi slavers. That was what the problem was. Oh, well, we'll name some military bases after them. We'll even erect monuments and statues to their rebel generals, their traitorous generals, just to show that we can all get along. And while we're propping up these monuments to appease whatever it is that they feel aggrieved from, they have been plotting to destroy the America that we know. And the America that we know does not have slavery. That's why a pug like gets what he wants. The Great Replacement Theory. It's not a theory. They're putting it in action. That's why they are Nazis. All right? It's about time that we call them what they are and stop beating ourselves up because, we're being so mean. It's about time we got a little bit meaner. Within constitutional restraints, of course. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off? Well, I did allude to Ben Rhodes at the top, imploring that it is time to turn the page, and we ought to attend to these issues diplomatically. And if the Taliban wants to be dicks, well, we have the air power, and we have the proxies, and we will protect the Afghan people. Let's not ever forget that. On the rest of the menu, the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee will consider Biden's 3 Postal Board of Governors nominees on the 22nd of April, next week. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell defended the Fed's consideration of climate change risks to the economy because Republicans don't think it has any economic impacts. And an epic drought has caused a water crisis among farmers, tribes, and environmentalists on the Oregon-California border. No wonder the Fed is doing what they're doing. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Biden administration will announce, and I think they already have, sanctions in response to a massive Russian hacking campaign that breached vital federal agencies. And in a stinging rebuke to pharma giant AstraZeneca, the EU threw its weight behind the Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, right there by the social media scroll, by the way. And the chat room, of course, as you know, is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And if you didn't know, you know now. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then take a gander across the page, that's at netrootsradio.com, by the way. If you would then take a gander across the page to the left, you will then notice, hopefully, the link to our Patreon page. And we have that there because we ask for money every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That's what we do, regularly at least. And why do we ask for money is because we have to pay our bills. And though the bulk of how we do it does come out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do it without you. And thank you to those of you who have been so generous over these 10 years. That's right, 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting. We are the resistance powerhouse that could, and we are. And we want to thank you for being so generous to allow us to do so. And how do we do it? Well, we ask you if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month. As I mentioned, we pool that money with what we pull out of our own wallets. We pay our bills. We fly under the radar, and we continue Resistance Radio as the founders originally intended. They did. And thank you for your generosity, and thank you for being so generous in the future, because we're not giving up. It's not time to quit. We have Nazis trying to take over the government, and we will not allow that to happen, ever. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary. That's right. It's going to be a diary, not a story. And that goes up on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I scramble to get that linked up with social media like Twitter and other platforms, and you know who they are. So do check out the show notes and links. They are an integral part, because that's where the real reportage is. It is. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They're everywhere. Now, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of Reuters by David Shepardson. The U.S. Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee will hold an April 22 hearing on President Joe Biden's 3 nominees to serve on the U.S. Postal Board of Governors, the panel announced yesterday, Wednesday. The announcement comes after the USPS in March outlined a proposed 10-year strategic plan that would slow current first-class delivery standards and raise some prices to stem the $160 billion in forecasted red ink over the next decade. How about getting rid of that pre-funding the pension plan for workers that haven't even been born yet? How about that? Because then they would be making a profit, and obviously the Republican Nazis don't want that. The Postal Office is in the Constitution, by the way. Let's not forget that. The plan has drawn criticism from many U.S. lawmakers, that 10-year strategic plan to basically destroy the USPS. And many U.S. lawmakers, including some calling for the board to fire Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, and others who have urged Biden to remove the existing board members. DeJoy, a supporter of Trump, was named head of the Postal Service last year. After heavy criticism, DeJoy suspended operational changes in August ahead of the 2020 presidential election. Remember that? And then he lied about it. And then they destroyed what? Sorting machines at the USPS, so it would slow down the mail, and maybe, the non-hackable write-in mail ballots, paper ballots, would never be delivered to be counted. They can't be hacked, but we can throw them away. Democrats said the service cuts were an attempt to boost Trump's re-election chances. DeJoy denied that. And in testimony before Congress noted USPS delivered more than 135 million ballots ahead of the 2020 elections and went to, quote, extraordinary lengths, end quote, to get ballots delivered. So much so they, destroyed trucks, wouldn't allow anybody to work overtime, and, as I mentioned, destroyed the sorting machines. Biden nominated Anton Hajar, former general counsel of the American Postal Workers Union, Amber McReynolds, CEO of the National Vote at Home Institute, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to expanding vote-by-mail systems, and former elections official in Denver, and also Ron Stroman, a former deputy postmaster general. The 6 current board members and DeJoy are all white men, and the board's lack of diversity has also come under heavy criticism. USPS officials told Reuters last month they were optimistic Congress will pass financial reforms, providing the money-losing agency with as much as $60 billion in relief. DeJoy has warned without changes, USPS would need a government bailout. How about we get rid of that pre-funding of that pension plan for workers that are not even born yet? They have to make that every quarter, by the way. Representative Carolyn Maloney, who chairs the committee overseeing the USPS, has circulated draft legislation that would eliminate a requirement that the USPS pre-fund retiree health benefits. See? Where will that go? Will there be a bipartisan work on that? No, the Nazis want to destroy the Postal Service. And her bill would also require postal employees to enroll in government retiree health plan Medicare. Oh no, socialized medicine! Now, the USPS has reported net losses of $86.7 billion since 2007. The reason is the 2006 legislation mandating it pre-fund more than $120 billion in retiree health care and pension liabilities for workers not even born yet, by the way. It goes 70 years into the future. A requirement labor unions have called an unfair burden not shared by other businesses. Well, a lot of people more than just the labor unions have mentioned that. Jeez. DeJoy's plan to revamp would revise existing 1 to 3 day service standards for first-class mail letters to 5 days. And USPS said 61% of current first-class mail volume would stay at its current standard. Christopher Rugeber of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here. In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell defended the Fed's increasing scrutiny of the threat that climate change could pose to the health of the nation's banks after some Republican members of Congress had complained that by doing so, the Fed was overstepping its mandate. Over the past year, the Fed has taken steps to incorporate the risks from climate change into its oversight of the financial system. A key part of the Fed's mandate, in addition to setting short-term interest rates to either stimulate or slow the economy, is regulating banks to guard against excessive risk-taking. Last year, the central bank joined an international organization of central banks and regulators to coordinate on managing the risks that climate change poses to the financial industry. In a report last year on financial stability, the Fed, for the first time, cited such risks and established an internal climate committee. Climate risks include the potential for banks to hold too many mortgage loans for homes in coastal areas that are threatened by rising sea levels, or loans to oil and gas drillers that could fail if energy generation switches to renewable energy. Last month, 12 Republican senators wrote a letter to Powell accusing the central bank of moving beyond the scope of the Federal Reserve's mission. We question both the purpose and efficacy of climate-related banking regulation and scenario analysis, especially because the Federal Reserve lacks jurisdiction over and expertise in environmental matters, the letter said. The letter was signed by Senator Pat Toomey, the senior Republican on the Banking Committee, and Republican Senators Richard Shelby. Oh, insider trader Shelby. Mike Crapo of Idaho, and Tim Scott of South Carolina, among others. In an interview, Powell also reiterated the Fed will use to consider any future increases to its short-term rate, which has been pegged near zero since the pandemic erupted in March of last year. Well, it actually erupted more in November of 2019, but you know what they mean. The job market's recovery would have to be effectively complete, Powell said, and inflation would have to reach the Fed's 2% annual target and appear on track to run moderately above 2% for some time. That's when we will consider raising interest rates, and that's when we will raise interest rates, the chairman said. Until then, we won't. The Fed has been buying $120 billion in Treasury and mortgage bonds each month to keep longer-term borrowing costs, such as mortgage rates, low. Powell said the Fed would start slowing those purchases after we make substantial further progress toward its goals. That would, in all likelihood, be well before the time we'd consider raising interest rates. As in the past, Powell also acknowledged that many disadvantaged Americans have not benefited from the recovery and, in fact, have continued to suffer. He mentioned a group of homeless people he sees living in tents in Washington on his way to and from work at the Fed headquarters, something he'd also noted in an interview last Sunday on 60 Minutes. It's a lot of tents. It's a lot of people, he said. It strikes me every day as I drive by it. We don't have the tools that deal directly with them, but many of them were probably working in February of 2020 before the pandemic hit, and I think they need to be in the room with us as we make our decisions about monetary policy. Julian Flacus of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Hundreds of farmers who rely on a massive irrigation project that spans the Oregon-California border learned yesterday, Wednesday, they will get a tiny fraction of the water they need amid the worst drought in decades as federal regulators attempt to balance the needs of agriculture against federally threatened and endangered fish species that are central to the heritage of several tribes. Oregon's governor said the prolonged drought in the region has the full attention of our offices, and she is working with congressional delegates, the White House, and federal agencies to find relief for those affected. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation briefed irrigators, tribes, and environmental groups after delaying the decision for a month. The federally owned irrigation project will draw 33,000 acre-feet of water from the Upper Klamath Lake, which farmers said was roughly 8% of what they need. Water deliveries will also start June 1st, 2 months later than usual for the 1,400 irrigators who farm the 225,000 acres. The simple fact is it just hasn't rained or snowed this year. We all know how dry our fields are, and the rest of the watersheds are in the same boat. There is no easy way to say this, Ben Duvall, president of the Klamath Water Users Association, told several dozen irrigators who gathered in Klamath Falls yesterday morning to hear the news. We all know what it is going to mean to our farms, our families, and our community as a whole. For some of us, it may mean we're not in business anymore next year. Governor Kate Brown, and of course we know she's a Democrat, said in a statement that Oregon water regulators are reviewing a plan to allow irrigators to pump more than twice as much groundwater per acre for their crops as allowed last year when drought reduced water supplies to a lesser extent. My message to the people of the Klamath Basin today is this. You are not alone, said Brown, who has declared a drought emergency in the region. The seasonal allocations are the most dramatic development in the region since irrigation water was all but cut off to hundreds of farmers in 2001 amid another severe drought, the first time the interests of farmers took a back seat to those of fish and tribes. The crisis made the rural farming region, hundreds of miles from any major city, a national political flashpoint and became a touchstone for Republicans who used the crisis to take aim at the Endangered Species Act, with one GOP lawmaker calling the irrigation shutoff a poster child for why changes were needed. A bucket brigade protest attracted 15,000 people who scooped water from the Klamath River and passed it hand over hand to a parched irrigation canal. The Yurok tribe, one of the tribes affected by the water decision, said that even with the slashes to farmers' water, they were facing a catastrophic loss of salmon this year. The Yurok tribe is suffering significant economic damage on top of the extreme cultural and social impacts of failing fish runs, said Tribal Vice Chairman Frankie Myers. Jay Weiner, an attorney for the Klamath tribes, said the tribe was pursuing legal action over water releases that will impact fish and accused the federal government of precipitating the crisis by mismanaging the water in the basin for decades. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
A fast-growing front in the battle against climate change is focused on developing green technologies aimed at reducing humankind's carbon footprint. But many scientists say simply reducing emissions is no longer enough. We have to find new ways to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. A Maine startup is looking to raise a sinkable carbon-capturing forest in the open ocean. I'm Teresa Carey, and this is Scientific American's 60-Second Science.
In a few weeks, these tanks will be full of little baby oysters the size of a piece of quinoa. But right now, they're still in the larval stage.
Adam Bass strolls through a warehouse on the coast of Harpswell, Maine. Surrounding him are trays of oysters, with water circulating between them in small tubes. In another room stands rows of 8-foot-tall tanks of algae, growing at different stages. The algae will be food for the oysters. If you've never seen a shellfish hatchery, this one looks pretty typical. But it's not. This year, they're planning to harvest something new: atmospheric carbon. His company, called Running Tide Technologies, plans to grow vast quantities of seaweed in drifting ocean mini-farms, farms that the company plans to sink to the bottom of the ocean.
So this is basically taking the emissions of our fossil fuel burning, locking them back up into the structure of the kelp, and sending it back to the bottom of the ocean, where it's at least locked up for hundreds to thousands of years because of the great pressure and the slow movement of the water in the deep ocean.
Kelp, like other plants, uses photosynthesis to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Colette Feehan, a marine ecologist at Montclair State University, who does not work with Running Tide Technologies, says that kelp is a no-brainer when it comes to carbon sequestration.
The productivity of kelp forests has been found to be comparable to tropical rainforests, meaning that they put on a great deal of biomass, and that biomass is stored carbon. So they're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it in their tissues.
It can do this because it grows fast, about a foot per month. It also quickly sinks to the sea floor. Once there, it degrades very slowly. Trees, on the other hand, store carbon, but ultimately release it back to the atmosphere when they die and decompose. Kelp can stay effectively buried on the seafloor, its carbon entombed by the crushing pressure and lack of oxygen for hundreds, maybe thousands of years.
Certainly as a climate change mitigation strategy, there's mounting evidence that this is a good approach. These forests aren't taking up land that would otherwise be used for agriculture or housing. So there's really no negative side to growing kelp forests.
How it works is that Running Tide Technologies hangs a kelp mini farm tube from a biodegradable buoy, which they set adrift in the ocean currents. Over several months, the kelp absorbs carbon, growing longer and heavier until it sinks to the bottom, taking the stored carbon with it. They're still experimenting with the buoy's material, trying out glass, cellulose, and other materials. Bask is Running Tide Technologies' head of business development. He says that the project is still in its early stages, with about 1,600 buoys. This year, they're focused on assessing the project's impact, looking for problems like whale entanglement, and evaluating the feasibility with sensors and trackers. In the future, they're aiming for millions of microfarms, sponging up billions of tons of carbon, which they plan to sell in the carbon offset market.
Some of the biggest companies in the world already have net zero commitments, are hungry for permanent, verifiable carbon offsets. And that doesn't mean they have net zero emissions. It means they're offsetting their emissions while they're also reducing their emissions.
Shopify, an e-commerce company for online stores, will be one of the first companies to buy carbon offsets from Running Tide Technologies.
This can be one of the many solutions we need to employ to have a chance in this fight. We need to mobilize the troops for this war, and if we don't build the infrastructure and the knowledge base to give us a fighting chance, then we might as well give up now.
Running Tide Technologies is drawing from the strong fishing tradition on the Maine coast and casting a net for carbon.
I think very few people on the planet have an appreciation for the scale of our oceans. And, 70% of our planet, it's just such an incomprehensible number, I think, for a lot of people. And the opportunity to kind of put that surface area to work in helping us solve like the biggest challenge facing humanity. I can't think of, a more inspiring or motivating mission.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Teresa Carey.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day the telephone girls, as they were called, walked out on strike against New England Bell, essentially crippling communications in 5 New England states. It was considered the most massive strike of women workers since the uprising of the 20,000 in 1909. They were members of the all-women National Telephone Operators Department of the IBEW. Historian Stephen Norwood devoted many pages to the strike in his book, Labor's Flaming Youth. The government had taken over the nation's telephone and telegraph industries during World War I and placed it under the control of Postmaster General Albert Burleson. Just days earlier, thousands of angry women who worked in the Boston exchanges packed Faneuil Hall, demanding immediate strike action. Julia O'Connor, the leader of the Telephone Operators Union, called for the strike on this day at 7 a.m. The union demanded a 60% wage increase and full scale to be reached after 4 years instead of 7. Union and non-union alike responded to the strike call and walked off the job, establishing 24-hour picketing. On the second day of the strike, over 1,000 striking telephone operators marched through the streets of Boston and were cheered on by returning soldiers. O'Connor organized picketing around the Boston hotels where out-of-town strikebreakers were housed. Unionized service workers across the city denied services to the scabs. Postmaster Burleson smeared the striking women as unpatriotic and threatened to replace them with returning soldiers. The soldiers, however, sided with the telephone operators. After 5 days, the union won direct bargaining rights and a $4 a week raise. The strike was considered one of the few post-World War I strikes to end in victory.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro's Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 75. Plentiful sunshine, the Weather Underground says, with winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-40s, winds remaining light and variable. Sunny skies throughout the day tomorrow with highs near 80, winds light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stand at 9,760. In spite of the fact that we have been vaccinating, we have a lot of, well, shall we just say, religious zealots who think they know better. And we have now increased the deceased number to 126. Grass pollen is rated as moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 28 parts per million, and that daytime UV index for the region remains high at 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.08 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 73%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 47 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 51 and sunny. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 57 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 51 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 57 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Emer Madhani and Eric Tucker of the AP bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Biden administration is ready to announce sanctions in response to a massive Russian hacking campaign that breached vital federal agencies as well as for election interference. The sanctions, foreshadowed for weeks by the administration, would represent the first retaliatory action announced against the Kremlin for last year's hack, familiarly known as the SolarWinds breach. In that intrusion, Russian hackers are believed to have infected widely used software with malicious code, enabling them to access networks of at least 9 agencies in what U.S. officials believe was an intelligence gathering operation aimed at mining government secrets. Besides that hack, U.S. officials last month alleged that Russian President Vladimir Putin authorized influence operations to help Trump in his unsuccessful bid for re-election as president, though there's no evidence Russia or anyone else changed votes or manipulated the outcome. The measures are to be announced today, and I think they already have because I saw Klimnik's name brought up as someone that they're not only sanctioning, but he has a red card Interpol arrest warrant plus arrest warrants from our own DOJ. It was not immediately clear what, if any, other actions may be planned. Officials had previously said they expected to take actions both seen and unseen. The sanctions, presumably intended to send a clear retributive message to Russia and to deter similar acts in the future, come amid an already tense relationship between the U.S. and Russia. President Joe Biden told Putin this week in their second call to de-escalate tensions following a Russian military buildup on Ukraine's border, and said the U.S. would act firmly in defense of its national interests regarding Russian intrusions and election interference. It remained unclear whether the U.S. actions would actually result in changed behavior, especially since past measures by the U.S. have failed to bring an end to Russian hacking. U.S. officials are still grappling with the after effects of the SolarWinds intrusion, which affected agencies including the Treasury, Justice, Energy, and Homeland Security departments, and they are still assessing what information may have been stolen. The breach exposed vulnerabilities in the supply chain as well as weaknesses in the federal government's own cyber defenses.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rafe Cassard of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In a stinging rebuke to pharma giant AstraZeneca, the European Union announced plans to negotiate a massive contract extension for Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine, insisting the 27-nation bloc had to go with companies that had shown their value in the pandemic. We need to focus on technologies that have proven their worth, said EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She also announced that America's Pfizer and Germany's BioNTech would provide the EU with an extra 50 million doses in the second quarter of this year, making up for faltering deliveries of AstraZeneca. In contrast to the criticized Anglo-Swedish company, van der Laan said Pfizer-BioNTech has proven to be a reliable partner. It has delivered on its commitments, and it is responsive to our needs. That is the immediate benefit of U.S. citizens. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and of course we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.